The cold shoulder, psychological abuse in disguise. Giving the cold shoulder is a strategy frequently used by people who pretend to have a great deal of self-control. People who claim to be more rational than emotional. At the same time, it is not only an expression of passive violence, but also a hidden strategy in psychological abuse. It can cause great harm to people on the receiving end. The cold shoulder is characterized by a group of behavior types with the goal of ignoring the other person. We see it in all kinds of relationships. In couples, friends, parents and children, relatives, etc. Conflicts precede the use of the cold shoulder. Sometimes the victim of this type of behavior is not aware of the conflict. The other party has not expressed it openly. The worst sin against our fellow men is not to hate them, but to be indifferent to them. That is the essence of inhumanity. George Bernard Shaw. The cold shoulder may involve the following actions: refusing to speak to someone, not acknowledging what they say, pretending you can't hear them, distancing yourself or avoiding their company as if they were contagious, ignoring their expressed needs, or other types of behavior intended to make a person feel unimportant or invisible. These types of behavior are quite harmful. They don't just display immaturity and a lack of emotional intelligence. They can also have serious consequences for the other person. The behaving this way is an attempt to control and harms. It is anything but positive for a relationship. The cold shoulder can create stress and emotional trauma. The person who is the target of the cold shoulder may feel very intense negative emotions. Ignoring someone means that they are worthless, that they don't matter. It becomes even more unhealthy when all this happens in an evil and cold silence. It is a silence that the victim cannot figure out how to interpret. People who are ignored eventually become overwhelmed with sadness, which can sometimes lead to depression. They also feel anger, fear and guilt. Ignoring someone is a way of indirectly accusing or pointing fingers at them. For this very reason, the cold shoulder is an unhealthy strategy for dealing with conflict. The victims of this behavior often feel very unhappy. They don't understand what they are doing wrong, or exactly why the other person is treating them this way. It's like they're losing control. This creates a lot of stress. Therefore, it is considered abuse. There is no shouting or physical violence, but there is plenty of violence nonetheless. The cold shoulder also has physical consequences. Studies have shown that feeling left out or ignored can create changes in the brain. A zone in the human brain called the frontal lobe is responsible for picking up different levels of pain. Researchers have shown that this zone is activated when someone is exposed to the cold shoulder. Activating this zone means that there are also physical consequences. Common symptoms are headaches and digestive problems. Fatigue and insomnia are also normal ailments. If it is a long-term and serious situation, then serious problems such as high blood pressure, diabetes or even diseases such as cancer can arise. The immune system is also affected mainly due to the high amounts of stress that the situation creates. The consequences are more serious if the cold shoulder comes from authority figures such as teachers, parents or bosses. Learning to negotiate in these situations. Sometimes the cold shoulder is used by two people who love each other, such as romantic partners, good friends, siblings, etc. Sometimes people think that if they use the cold shoulder, the other person will change their behavior, or do what the other wants. They think it is a tool for learning. But they are horribly wrong. Ignoring the other person as a punishment only destroys relationships. As with many tactics that are defensive and stem from insecurity, using the cold shoulder demonstrates a lack of communication skills. Silence can be healthy when tempers are at boiling point and a break is needed before the situation escalates. But when silence is used as control or punishment, it is abuse. No one should passively allow others to ignore them. At least not without an explanation for their behavior. And no one should try to resolve a conflict using the cold shoulder. When there is a problem between two people, the only healthy choice is to talk to find a solution. Silence and distance only create more problems and solve nothing in the end. Zombing. When someone who disappeared comes back. Dealing with zombing puts you in a complicated situation. It opens old wounds after the balance you have achieved. You may have become familiar with the terms ghosting, disappearing from other people's lives without explanation, and orbiting, breaking a relationship with someone but still interacting with them through social media. Now it's time to learn about another related term, zombing, whether you like these words or not. One thing is for sure, today, it is necessary to name these intimate phenomena linked to the world of technology. Why? Because these media have changed the ways people interact with each other. They have changed the way people begin and end both romantic and platonic relationships. Zombing is a type of behavior you're probably familiar with. It refers to someone who ghosted you, then miraculously comes back to life. They may do this via a text message or messenger app, or comment on your user on social media. Someone you thought was gone forever returns to your life with one purpose: to rekindle the relationship. As strange as it may seem, it is a very common phenomenon, and the worst part about it is that it causes a lot of pain. Dealing with the unexplained disappearance of someone you had an emotional connection with, is hard. However, dealing with those who return is a particularly difficult dilemma. Let's go deeper into this. Zombing. When someone who left you without saying goodbye comes back. Maybe you are immersed in your work or hanging out with your friends, or maybe you're even with your new romantic partner. Then it happens. You get a notification on your phone, look, and there they are. Someone who was important to you decided to stop responding for no reason suddenly returns. Often they do it with cheerfulness, innocence, and even a bit of charm. They usually do this with a simple greeting like, "Hi, how are you? How are you feeling? I miss you." Or maybe they say, "Hey, you've been looking good on Instagram lately. Shall we have a drink together?" If this has happened to you, you have experienced zombing, a term coined in 2016. Additionally, these 21st century zombies have an uncanny, almost supernatural ability to return just when you've gotten over the pain of their absence. You have rebuilt your life with emotional bandages and stitches to ease the pain of their disappearance. Their ghosting left you devastated, and then it knocks on your door. What do you do in this situation? And more importantly, what kind of people do this? These zombies need to feed their egos. Those who practice zombing don't just appear around Halloween. A real zombie comes out when they are hungry. Their longing to feed their starving ego leads them to reach out to someone who once gave them what they needed: admiration, love, and attention. You may well call them narcissists, or simply immature people with very little empathy. However, this behavior unifies several processes. One of them is bad relationships. In addition to saying they have some kind of personality disorder, consider this a social behavior. Unfortunately, it's a pattern that's becoming increasingly common. A person who suddenly left one day does not need an excuse to come back. They do it because they don't value the connection in a relationship. Their conscience is clear and they see no problem in their behavior. The person who was a ghost before returns as a zombie. It's about their appetites and needs. Love is disposable, made to use and then throw away or even recycle. If this former partner comes back into your life after leaving you, they are doing it to feed their ego. You can also be sure that their current reality is probably not very stimulating. They need new reinforcement and hope that you will give it to them as you did before. the best thing to do is to avoid opening the door. Dealing with zombing puts you in a complicated situation. It opens old wounds. After the balance you have achieved, their sudden disappearance shook you and you had to get over both the surprise and the rage. The people who come back into your life do it in style and try to get your attention as if nothing happened. What should you do under these circumstances? First, to be very careful. You should not lose perspective and, as tempted as you are to read their messages, listen to what they say or respond to their invitations that take you back to happy moments. Don't, for their return is never accidental or innocent. The zombie always takes something, always comes back hungry, and does a great job of opening old wounds. If there is one thing you learned from being ghosted, it's that you shouldn't give anyone a chance to do it again. Love doesn't involve ghosts or zombies. Any relationship that hurts or blackmails you is not right and you do not deserve this pain. Stay far away from them. So don't be afraid to block them. Remember that your heart is sacred ground. Ghost, zombie and orbiting. The differences and the consequences for those who are victims. What is ghosting and why does it hurt? Above all, how does it differ from other cases where someone vanishes into thin air without saying a word? Ghosting, zombing, orbiting. The names of the trends that characterize the dating world in the age of social media may seem obscure or incomprehensible, but the phenomena they describe are all too clear to those who have experienced them. Let's clarify once and for all, what are the differences, what are the consequences, and above all, how should one behave with those who practice them? What is ghosting? Ghosting is a term derived from ghost, that is, to disappear. The people who practice it actually disappear as if they were dead or never existed. Put more technically, the ghost abruptly cut off communication with someone without giving explanations. The term most often refers to romantic relationships, but can also describe people who disappear overnight from friendships and the workplace. Ghosting, zombing and orbiting. The differences. But what are the differences between all the different terms that describe different ways of escaping, and sometimes returning, from a relationship, regardless of its nature? After ghosting the zombies, in fact, the term zombie comes from the living dead, born to describe those who, after ghosting someone, decide to go back as if nothing happened, or at least try to reconnect as if he had returned from the beyond. In some cases, those who abandon a relationship do not disappear completely, but continue to orbit the other person at a distance. In these cases, we get lost in orbit when a person cuts off all direct and significant communication, but continues to interact on average social networks. The psychological reasons for those who do it. Ghosting is often described as a form of cowardice. One does not want to accept the consequences of one's actions, nor take responsibility for them, in which cognitive dissonance can also play a role. Our brains naturally focus on information that confirms a pre-existing belief about something, even when other evidence suggests we may be wrong, so the ghost becomes convinced that what they are doing is perfectly fine. Furthermore, it can also be the result of a certain set of beliefs about relationships and, more importantly, destiny. One study found that people who believe that everyone has a predestined soulmate were much more likely to believe that disappearing without a word was acceptable. The consequences for the victim. Being a victim of ghosting, zombing or orbiting can leave you feeling deeply confused. You don't know if the relationship is really over or if there is another reason why the other person is disappearing. You may worry that something terrible has happened. Even when it is clear that the relationship is over, the lack of an explanation makes it difficult to understand what happened, which is why the emotional consequences of ghosting can be very serious. There is a profound lack of closure in the relationship, an ambiguity that makes it impossible to digest the end of the relationship. The victim lacks the social cues of a traditional breakup, less time spent together, lack of eye contact, changes in tone. The ghost deprives the victim of any chance to work through what went wrong in the relationship. Above all, it leads to self-questioning, which can be devastating to self-esteem. Because of this, some people see it like the silent treatment as a form of emotional cruelty. How is ghosting handled? There is no right or wrong way to deal with someone ghosting us. Even the biggest doubts ask for explanations or not largely depends on the type of relationship and its duration. If a person has stopped communicating after the second or third appointment, it is probably useless to contact them, and probably better to immediately break off the relationship if this is the premise. If, on the other hand, the relationship is longer, the request for reasons can be understandable and useful to have closure. The important thing is to be direct and honest. The important thing to remember is that while it is normal to feel hurt, there is nothing to feel guilty about, nor is it okay to let the other person affect our self-esteem.